So, as I always say, this story is a creepypasta and is therefore intended to be taken seriously. And with that being said, please enjoy and do make sure to leave your thoughts and feelings in the comments section down below. Thank you. My name is Bruno Tattagllia. No, I'm not. Actually, call me Pompadour. Pompadour P. Pompadour. Yes, that's my name. And don't you forget. If you do, I'll give you a friendly reminder and a pat on the nose for being such a forgettable piece of tomato paste. Let me tell you something, Bubby Brister. Money talks. And if you don't got money, then I'm afraid you're not going to get very far in this life. Believe me, I would know. I'm a doctor. Allow me to explain it, if you'll let me, that is. Would you kindly? Back in around 2015, my husband and part-time Chewit stealer, Peter Napaldi, were living it up in the high life, and we owned our own mansion over in Walnut Pass. Our mansion was by far the biggest McMansion in all of Walnut Pass. Using my hard-earned millions, which I gained from being a member of James King's hedge fund loophole, I was able to buy myself a load of luxury items, including an incredibly smelly butler named Hoover. Hoover is incredibly smelly and always pulls faces, which look like he's just smelt the smelliest fart that has ever been smelled. Wow. Hoover got his iconic name because his father was a big supporter of Henry Hoover, or at least that's what the papers claim. If it's in the papers, it must be true, Dudley Do-Right. In reality, no one ever proved it. I also went out of my way to buy a fucking talking dog named Marion. Marion! Sorry, it's just taken me this long to realize what a stupid name that really is. Very naughty of me to have named her that, isn't it, my pork? Marion is an incredibly smart dog who wears glasses. So that's how you know she's smart. Well, sadly, Marion's been away recently due to her now attending Oxford University with one of McCluskey's sons. I heard Spider-Man was there. Also, Marion has a serious addiction to fry-ups and once tried to eat my fry-up until Hoover and I told her knuckles. Have you not dreamed of telling your dog to not eat your fry-up? Fry-up? Fry. My husband, Peter Napaldi, and I met at Playhouse Disney in around, 2007, maybe 2008. We were both interns and bonded over our love of cargo holders in Boston and Las Venturas. At the time, Peter had a wife named Emily who, well, for lack of a better word, was a total bitch. She used to eat Cocoa Pops with a fork. She also used to spit in Peter's cups of hot, steamy Tetley tea. That is just so sick and wrong on so many levels. Thankfully, Emily ended up getting killed in a violent plane crash, along with her undercover lover, Colonel Bernal, after the latter made a rather disgusting episode of My Friends Tigger and Pooh, which led me to me, Peter, and the rest of the staff all getting fired from Playhouse Disney. I think I told you that story before. It's also what led to the company's name being changed to Disney Junior. I believe Peter already posted his account of the events that took place that Fruitful Day in December 2010. So see it now. After getting fired from Playhouse Disney, Peter and I became involved in a hedge fund scheme launched by corrupt businessman James King. James King is an incredibly powerful businessman who's known to throw morgue parties from time to time, the sick prick. James helps kickstart several run-of-the-mill companies, including the small-town fish and chips place where the chef gives 2 extra sausages to a homeless man, but only a slice of bread to the Baron of Barons. James King was, however, very corrupt. He used the hedge fund to scam money from the British government. He viewed the government as being nothing more than a mild rectal itch, and so he offered me and Peter a slice of the pie. The hedge fund worked by stealing money from the bank accounts of the companies that James had chosen to invest his money into. He was covertly robbing them, essentially. However, things all came crashing down when one of James' employees turned out to be an undercover FBI agent who'd passed information on James' activities over to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The feds gave James a stiff sentence of 242 years in prison. Oh, I'm sorry, I mean 576. But James only ended up serving 6 months after he joined up with the Mayo gang. You see, the Mayo Gang is a gang who are obsessed with salad cream and seek to destroy any mayonnaise bottle in existence. Not were you expecting the Mayo Gang to be about, was it, my little cheeky chocolate digestive biscuit? Gosh, I'm such a prick. Anyways, James is a completely different man these days. He got a piece of metal stabbed into his head. Head injury has caused James to become very charitable. Now lives in a cardboard box just north of Strawberry. Still kept some feelers out back home in Walnut Pass, so we don't need to worry about that, do we? When the news of the hedge fund scam became public, Peter and I were brought in front of the Grand Court. We were able to evade justice by singing a song about how sometimes an ugly little shrew will rub her nose and attempt to con station masters out their boiled eggs. Fuck is this? The big Chungus judge looking over the case was so moved by the song that Peter and I were allowed to walk away free just like that. However, our lives became upturned as the judge had us forcibly evicted from our mansion. You see, the judge was incredibly corrupt, and he wanted to conceal his corruption by evicting me and my friends from our home. Not really sure how evicting us from our home would help save his reputation, but whatever. That big Chungus judge ain't too bright, you know. And so, needing a place to stay, Peter and I bought an old run-down caravan in the rural countryside just a few square yards from the town of Greendale. What time will Jimmy the Lid be there? Sorry, I'm not sure how my shopping list got into the story. Anyway, living in a caravan isn't very good as it's very cramped. That was mainly Peter's fault. He bought loads of portraits of incredibly scary people who stare at you, but when you look back, you see only windows instead. All portraits are personalized. Though through it all, the portraits offer you protection, whether you're right or wrong. Around this time, Marion got an internship at Oxford University. Remember, that's my dog who wears glasses. Decided to go there in order to get a degree in economics. I'm sure most dogs have a keen interest in econ. So when Marion leaving the nest, Peter and I decided to fill the void of her absence by adopting a child named Ryan Pye and feeding him Alpo. Ryan Pye was once a junior cadet at a military school up in New Hampshire, but he was fired after he insulted his barber for having a thing for making people balder than a boiled egg. Being a bald man myself, you probably noticed by now, I take great offense to that remark. Peter and I don't believe in education, so we've decided to homeschool Ryan. Ryan's a very weird kid. He's obsessed with dolls. That means cigarette. Doll means cigarette. Doll, you doll. Guys and dolls. He has an entire room in an underground... cigarette. Has an entire room in an underground bunker hidden beneath our trailer dedicated to them. One time in military school, Ryan stole a doll that was meant to be given to General W.R. Munger. Now, exactly what W.R. Munger had wanted to do with that doll is anyone's guess. I think we can safely assume it involved Netflix and eggs. Oh, yeah, I went there. The problem with adopting Ryan was that it meant we had yet another mouth to feed. Needed some more space, you know? We only had so much dog food. So, seeking to rebuild my fortunes and possibly get my mansion back, I agreed to go on a hunting trip with Hoover and Emil Slade. We headed to Lake Vernon and attempted to catch some fish, but I was very stupid back then, you see. I neglected to listen to any of Slade's advice. "Well, you listening to me, you stupid prick?" Amos Slade asked before bellowing, "Now take the damn shot!" Yeah, Slade was using guns to catch the fish, as he did own a fishing rod. Can we get him one? I don't know. Probably. However, I ended up shooting my shotgun at an old bee nest, which was located on the tree just above me, Slade and Hoover. The bee nest ended up landing on top of Slade's head. May I add, was pulling a very stupid face before it happened. Slade began running around the lake like a little bitch, trying his best to get the damn bee nest off, and he was stung so much I was forced to be taken to the Royal Hope Hospital. I recorded it. Now, that was a real bee movie. Get it? Okay, my bad. Sorry. Following Slade to the hospital, I was for some reason mistaken for being a doctor by the nurses, which is actually because my older brother is a doctor, so that makes logical sense, right? His name's not important, but it rhymes with waste disposal management in Bolivia. Fascinating. Now, I'm no doctor, so I ended up sticking my entire head through Slade's ear, and it came out the other ear. "I can see my house from here," I proclaimed happily as I was then forcibly removed from Slade's ear and evicted from the hospital and warned to never ever return. On my way back to the trailer, I attempted to take part in charity gala where you had to guess the correct weight of a cake. However, I was already feeling like quite a bastard that day, so instead opted to eat the entire cake. No one else in the charity gala got to eat any of it. After eating the cake, I put the weight down as being 0 pounds, which did not amuse the bakers, as they refused to pay me the big cash prize of 99 pounds. Well, there was either the huge cash prize or spend a week at wrestle camp. I mean, which would you go for? Just be careful, because your answer may end up distressing Mr. Krabs. Me boy! As if those two events were bad enough. That very evening, I received a visit from 2 bailiffs. Pompadour, Pompadour, one of the bailiffs inquired, which I responded with, Yes, Pompadour, Pompadour. The pair then proceeded to hand me my eviction notice, as I'd spent so much time dicking around with Slade and Hoover that I'd completely forgotten to pay the bills. Disgraced, I looked down at the floor at my slippers and saw the bills had already been piling up for months, but I'd just completely forgotten and neglected to pay them. We'll have 2 days to get your affairs in order before we evict your ass, the bailiffs explained as they left me alone to my thoughts. Oh dear, not wanting to end up homeless. You see, it's not like I've ever been a homeless man living in a dumpster in Little Havana. It never happened. I agreed to join Hoover in a risky venture. We decided to borrow a VHS tape from Tony Capriani, a local small-time but still dangerous gangster who has a lot of connections to some big shot from New York City. Upon being given the VHS tape, Hoover inquired, I say, old boy, why are you giving us such a VHS tape for? Tony Caparini puffed on a fat cigarette. I'm English, I can say it. As he said, I need you to sell it to the Azuka leader, Kenji Kason. He may be sticking a firecracker up your arse, but don't take too much notice. So you're trying to kickstart the war with the Azuka? I asked, but Caparini didn't answer. Annoyingly, before Hoover and I could even head back to the trailer, we were forced to help Caparini get his washing done at the local laundromat, which disallows people to enter holding baseball bats. Tony wasn't very smart. He thought you could wash baseball bats in the washing machine, which led to him getting chased out of the laundromat by a rightfully pissed-off owner. Shake this off! Tony barked at the top of his lungs. His lung capacity was kind of short from smoking all those faggots, that means cigarette. So we were forced to take Caparini with us back to the trailer. Arriving at the trailer, I finally asked Tony what the VHS was all about. Oh, it's an episode of Sesame Street. Kenji is scared of Sesame Street, as it is Sesame Street that killed his brother Pedri. Our trailer was in the middle of getting torn down by the bailiffs, but we were still allowed entry. Inside the trailer, we found Ryan to be brushing the hair of one of his dolls. That means cigarette or something. Yeah, so after explaining the situation over to Ryan, he asked if he could watch it with us, and Hoover agreed. I pulled out an extra chair for my ass for Tony Caparini to sit on, though I noticed he'd become very shifty ever since coming into our trailer. Whatever, probably nothing. Foreshadowing. Now, because we're skint, it means we don't have the money to buy a DVD player. We do own a VCR, though, which Hoover had gotten from his mother back in the summer of '42 after he punched Tic Tacs out of the local bully's mouth. Yeah, seriously, Hoover was a pretty tough kid back then. Ryan popped the VHS in a VCR. Oh, and before I forget, I mustn't forget to mention that the tape had nothing on it, but if you were to zoom in at least 9.990042%, you'd see Joe Biden's nose. Now, how could that be anything but a political statement? Maybe Caparini was receiving his kickbacks from Biden. The world may never know. It's also worth mentioning that Joe Biden was not the president at the time of this story taking place. So. If he ever was legitimately. We were still in the middle of a Trump dump, if you know what I mean. Let's not finish that thought. Also, I guess my VCR didn't like the VHS very much, as it caused the system to start shaking violently, to start making horrifying noises. Fearing for my life, I decided to pour some milk onto the VCR. Somehow managed to fix the issue. Does the body good? It prevents osteoporosis. Maybe it doesn't. Milk doesn't prevent osteoporosis at all. The VHS showed no commercials, instead cutting straight to the theme song of Sesame Street. It was very weird. It was sang by Smash Mouth. Sunny days,
Na, na, na. So on away right now, supplies are running out. You're watching a VHS. Maybe you have butt sex. And if you think that you're gay, that means cigarette.
The children featured in the theme song were actually middle-aged bank tellers trying their best to make voodoo dolls of big fat businessmen. Yeah, this was America, all right. After the theme song ended, the episode began with Big Bird just walking around Sesame Street. He was licking his lips because apparently he was incredibly thirsty. Probably diabetes. Needing a drink desperately, Big Bird decided to head on over to Hooper's store. Thought he was supposed to be dead. However, I must admit I was rather surprised to see who was running the store. Is that? Ryan began, but I cut him off with, Yes, it is. 'Tis Stretch. Harold Stretch Joseph was the owner of Hooper's, and according to newspaper clippings found thrown around the room, he gained ownership of the store after getting involved in a violent bloodbath with some business rivals from Santa Monica. Big Bird made his way up to the front desk and asked for a chocolate milkshake. You got money, punk? Stretch asked, who looked like he wanted to eat Big Bird for his dinner. Who could blame him? Well, no, Big Bird said rather sheepishly before continuing with, Alan usually lets me get my birdseed milkshakes for free, and... Free! Stretch cried at the top of his lungs before proceeding to pull out a handgun and pointing it right at Big Bird's head. You ain't got no respect, Buster! Stretch yelled as he threatened to shoot Big Bird's beak off. Not wanting to escalate the situation any further, Big Bird started to slowly back his way out of the store, only to end up tripping on a conveniently placed banana peel. The banana peel caused Big Bird to fall on top of Telly, crushing his back in half. Big Bird, get off of me, you stupid bastard! Telly cried in pain as Big Bird struggled to get off from him. After getting off Telly, Big Bird ran out of Hooper's and saw a rather odd sight. Kermit the Frog was filming his own segment, which involved him interviewing some rather serious-looking scientists. Kermit was asking the scientists about the vaccine to the brand new bird flu. This sounds familiar. And if there'd be a second wave to the flu. But what will Congress say should the vaccine be banned in Boston like it was in Russia? Kermit asked one of the scientists, who simply responded, and I quote, I don't fucking know. For some reason, Big Bird took a very amorous interest in the camera that Kermit was using in order to film the interview, and decided that he wanted a piece of some nice action. Big Bird came up to where the interview was taking place and proceeded to rudely push Kermit out of the way. It seems that Big Bird did not know his own strength, as the sheer force of his push caused Kermit to go flying to the other side of Sesame Street. Big Bird tricked the scientist into thinking he was Kermit's eager assistant, and the scientist seemed to buy the lie. Now about this new cure, Big Bird asked as one of the scientists held up the cure to the virus. It was a large and scary-looking mosquito contained in a small glass jar. It was buzzing around like no tomorrow as the scientists explained that so far this is the only sample of the cure to the bird flu. Wanting to get a better look and not realizing he could simply zoom in with the camera, Big Bird instead opted to move the camera closer and closer to the group of scientists. Unbeknownst to Big Bird, however, one of the scientists, the one holding the jar, had some serious intestinal problems, meaning he smelled like rotten meat and looked sicker than Arthur Morgan all the damn time. Well, gee, that's gotta suck. Big Bird ended up pushing the camera right into the scientist's chest, which caused him to start vomiting out his intestines and dropping the mosquito jar on the floor in the process. Oh, no. Oh, no. Oh, yeah. The jar broke into a million tiny bite-sized pieces, and the escaped mosquito, though thankful for Big Bird helping in its escape, still wanted to attack Big Bird for being a fucking weirdo. Yeah, well, can you blame him? Thinking quickly, Big Bird borrowed a butterfly net from a local hunter and tried his damn best to catch the mosquito, who was spitting acid and high levels of corn syrup on all the residents of Sesame Street. Fucking die! Bert yelled at the very top of his lungs as he attempted to shoot the damn mosquito down with a shotgun. Luckily for Bert, he and Ernie had done gun shopping early that day at the local Walmart. Yeah, they have one on Sesame Street, as they were trying to train their own ant circus to crawl through car doors. Bert suggested that he and Ernie get the guns in order to scare the ants into submission. Should have tried bumblebees, Bert. The mosquito picked up Bert and Ernie somehow and began flying with them towards his nest all the way over in Peppermint Park. To say that Big Bird was reprimanded for losing the cure to the bird flu would be an understatement of the century. All characters took turns yelling at Big Bird. Even Mr. Snuffleupagus and Abby Cadabby took turns to yell at Big Bird. Seems very out of character for them, if we're being honest here, people. It's also worth mentioning Mr. Snuffleupagus looked wrong. His eyes were bulging like some kind of Luca Brasi, and his mouth was swollen. Not only that, but there was a frickin' Komodo dragon living inside of Snuffy's mouth, which made him look even larger than he actually was. Seeing his two best friends in the whole entire world was just too much for Big Bird, and sheer terror decided to catch the subway to downtown Sesame Street. It's also worth knowing that I was watching this episode while in the bath, and that I bathed in vinegar. Yes, I keep a bathtub in my living room, don't you? Bobby! Hoover yelled angrily as I was getting bubbles all over the fucking place. I wear a Mr. Bubble t-shirt even while I bathe. I'm Mr. Bucket, the balls pop out of my mouth. Arriving in downtown Sesame Street, Big Bird was walking for a while till he ran into an all-too-familiar Muppet who goes by the name of Monty P. Hey, don't pretend we all know who that is. He's the most iconic and famous Muppet of them all. He's been on the show since 1492, to be exact. Monty P. was responsible for bringing out some of the more mature themes in Sesame Street, including episodes of him dealing dope to Cookie Monster solicitor, taking part in the murder of 6 Tattagllia gunmen who tried to execute Bert after they believed it was in bed with the Molinaris. Well, the only one Bert's in bed with is Ernie. It's not very hard to see why they suspected Bert of this, especially after Bert got Ernie and Grover involved in the grunge trade. Monty P. was an old friend of Big Bird and asked, "Hey, Big Bird, what's with the long face? Got a broom up your arse or something?"
"No, I just had a bad day, that's all,"
Big Bird admitted. But Monty P. could see through his ruse and said, "Now, look, you can be honest with me." It was clear to me from this encounter that Monty was an undercover vice detective. Sesame Street, according to the newspapers found in Hooper's store at the beginning of the episode, was in the middle of a massive drug crisis, and several dealers were trying to muscle their way into some nice action. Actually, my theory turned out being completely wrong, as 2 seconds later, Monty revealed that he was actually a priest and part-time hitman for the Atlanta Corporation. He told Big Bird that there was a gang in Sesame Street known as the Bird Crime Syndicate, run by a bird named James Bird. "What does that have to do with me?" Big Bird inquired, as Monty P. responded with, "Well, it's just that Mr. Bird and his associates are facing the same predicaments as you are, my little cheese grater." He then coughed out some eyeballs, as he then continued with, "They need a bird like you in their service, and I'm sure they'd be more than happy to help you get some sweet revenge on that bastard Stretch and those prick scientists." Big Bird decided to tempt fate, and he asked Monty for an address. The head of the Bird Crime Syndicate was a crow named Russell Crowe. No, James Bird. Had you for a moment. Bird established himself as a career criminal by stealing shower curtains in Empire Bay for 3 years. "I got shower curtains, mother of pearl," Bird would proclaim as he shoved the curtains into his beak. Somehow, by shoving the shower curtains into his beak, Mr. Bird was able to charge an inflated price for the damn things. People will do anything these days for prime shower curtains, even yours truly. Before we go on with the episode, I need to explain that from this point until the ending credits, Tony Caparini was acting very weirdly and kept fidgeting in his seat. "What's the matter?" Ryan asked, as Caparini responded with, "Just trying to chew the dog." Yes, Tony sure does love chewing dogs. Chewing hot dogs, that is, hot dogs. Aha. LOL, XD Raffle. I apologize for that, but in any case, Big Bird arrived at Bird's mansion, which was located on the very outskirts of Sesame Street. Big Bird knocked on the green door 576 times before finally being let in by Bird's assistants, who were these really annoying pigeons. The pigeons initially refused to introduce Big Bird to their leader, but after some persuasions, i.e. contracts to appear in the new Tom and Jerry movie, they agreed to bring Big Bird into the house. The house was beautiful, yet something seemed to be oddly familiar about it. That's when it finally hit me. "Oh, by Joe!" I proclaimed as I began eating a banana, B-A-N-A-N-A-S. "Pos? Hoover asked, who was very drunk on, well, we can guess it was wimp rat juice. As I responded with, "That's your old Munchin Hoover." "You fucking what?" Tony Cipriani barked in the careless whisper of a good friend. Wham! I got up from the sofa and attempted to run outside in order to inform Peter of those bastards over at Disney filming Sesame Street episodes in our house, only to find that Cipriani had handcuffed me to the sofa while I was busy eating that delicious banana. "You ain't going nowhere till we finish this episode," Cipriani warned, as I was forced to sit back down. I ended up sitting on Hoover's lap. I heard a loud snapping noise, but I'm sure it was nothing. I'm positive. I've been told I must say it's nothing else. Now, James Bird, being a very short-sighted bird, initially believed, based on the story from the pigeons, that Big Bird was an undercover cop. Bird got right up in Big Bird's grill and asked in an incredibly sinister tone, "You know what happens to rats, Big Bird?" "No. Well, people leave out mousetraps and..." Big Bird was cut off as he was pushed under the kitchen table by the pigeons. Bird, meanwhile, pulled out a large and rusty meat cleaver. Big Bird, however, was not as stupid as it seems, so he was able to deflect the blame of being a rat over the Bird's transport liaison, Ming, who was a very ugly-looking motherfucker with, no teeth. Who did have an addiction to chew it, so perhaps once again society's to blame. Poor Ming. James Bird threw the meat cleaver right at Ming's head, and it managed to slice his face in half like a Twix chocolate bar. Ming fell to the floor dead as Bird began rubbing Big Bird's eyes. "Welcome to the syndicate, Big Bird, but first you must pass the test." So for the next 20 minutes, Big Bird was forced to partake in a really boring exam as the screen transitioned to show him sitting inside of the large, empty, and downright smelly exam hall. After completing the exam and handing the paper into the old exam administrator who has a hook nose, Big Bird was finally fully inducted into the Bird Crime Syndicate. I was so proud of him, or something. Big Bird's first job for the syndicate was to help take control of Sesame Street's drug trade by killing the two most powerful dealers in town, Stretch and King Courtney. Is that a girl's name? Who heads the Uptown Yardies. Uptown Yardies, they've been living in an uptown world. Needing some serious firepower for the job, Big Bird opted to pay a visit to Vincenzo Silly at his warehouse down in Atlantic Quays. Vincenzo offered to help Big Bird with taking down King Courtney, claiming that Courtney had began stealing his customers, was selling dope to the Rice brothers against Vincenzo's wishes. Big Bird and Vincenzo headed on down to the Sesame Street dockyards, with Vincenzo demanding that Big Bird get on one of the old abandoned freighters. Once inside of the freighter, it's worth noting that on the side of the boat the name Old Jack could be seen. So anyways, Big Bird made his way below deck into the ship's cargo hold, where he found an incredibly old sea captain named Old Jack and his dog named Salty. He named the dog Salty because in 2003 he had a brief stint of being addicted to salt. I guess that's no weirder than your dog wearing glasses and going to Oxford. He would have salt on anything. Fish and chips, chocolate cake, cereal, and even electrical equipment. As it turns out, Vincenzo had actually set Big Bird up to be killed by Old Jack. But Old Jack was so delighted when he heard that Big Bird had joined up with the Bird Syndicate that he offered to help Big Bird find King Courtney. According to Jack, Courtney was making soup at his warehouse, and I don't mean soap like Fight Club. He was known to have a healthy business relationship with Minnie Mouse, of all people. So King Courtney was the one making the soup that Minnie would give to Goofy whenever he catches a rather nasty cold. Not so tough now, eh, Minnie? Side note, what if Minnie Mouse was really just Mickey Mouse dressed in drag? Think about that. LBGTQXY. Vincenzo then came into the cargo hold carrying an Uzi as he asked, "Is that dumbass bird dead yet?" Before Vincenzo could get an answer, the episode cut to black for 2 seconds. I guess the creators decided to cut off the scene where old Jack informs Vincenzo of his alliance with Big Bird. It's a damn shame, too, as it was a very funny scene which involved a super karaoke dance party in which Big Bird and Vincenzo sang about a bird in Chinatown who turned into a fortune cookie. I'm sure we've all heard that story at least once in our pathetic lives. Anyway, it's a good thing they didn't show it because I was very scared and it kept the story scary. When the episode came back, it was shown that Big Bird, Old Jack, Salty Dog, and Vincenzo were now all on the top of the ship. Jack was driving it, obviously, and Big Bird was using a telescope in order to marvel Sesame Street from across the sea. "Where are we headed?" Big Bird asked.
"Well, King Courtney usually has the local cafe for lunch at 2:30 in the afternoon, so we'll start with him."
Jack then proceeded to light himself a pipe as he then continued with,
"Once we've dealt with Courtney, we'll take down Stretch. He's over in Townsend Street handling some affairs with the street sweepers."
Turns out old Jack wasn't a very good driver. He was far too busy singing his trademark song to even bother noticing that his boat was swaying violently from left to right.
"This is the place to be for Salty Dog and me. Down by the harbor we'll be there. Round every corner there's something to share. Give us a chill, friends, and here this is Salty Dog and me."
Old Jack sang at the very top of his lungs. I guess his lungs weren't very, very loud.
"Laze, Jack, you drive like a bitch!"
Vincenzo cried as the ship ended up crashing into a conveniently placed iceberg. It's rather odd that there was an iceberg in the ocean. This episode quite clearly takes place in the summertime when the weather is fine, but whatever. Also, the sheer impact of the ship crashing into the iceberg was so bad that it caused Vincenzo to fall off the ship into the deep, dark, gray, and murky ocean below. Heard Mayor Hall pours battery acid in the ocean. That's why it looks so fucking disgusting. Instead of helping Vincenzo get back on the ship, Big Bird instead proclaimed, "Goodbye, weakling!" That seems rather out of character for Big Bird to have said that, but whatever. I brushed off as Big Bird and Old Jack, riding the ship on the shore. Going on, so there. For the next 5 minutes, Big Bird and Old Jack rode their ship through the streets of Sesame Street, completely destroying anything in their path. They even managed to run over Monty P, killing him instantly. Oh, Monty P, we hardly knew ya. I mean, literally hardly knew. Eventually, old Jack ended up crashing the ship into an old retirement home. The old ladies of the retirement home, who were providing their pension funds to the Albanians, seemed to be rather impassive about the fact that old Jack had crashed his boat into their retirement home. Well, not all of them were particularly pleased, as one of the old ladies jammed a spear right in old Jack's head, which he then spent the next 2 minutes trying his absolute best to remove. It was quite cringy to watch, so I attempted to turn my head away from the screen. It was old Tony Cipriani putting a handgun to my forehead.
"Did I say you could turn away?"
Cipriani questioned, before continuing with,
"Keep watching that episode or else you end up sleeping with the fishes. Nobody messes with Tony Cipriani."
After getting the spear out, old Jack ended up throwing it across the street like a moron and ended up stabbing Mr. Johnson right in the back. Needing to eliminate King Courtney, Big Bird suggested that he and Jack take a cab. Even though cabs don't usually allow dogs in them, this cab was very lenient, on the account that the driver was blind, and yet he still knew the streets of Sesame Street like the back of his foot. Maybe he was that blind guy from Charles Manson's ranch. The cab eventually pulled up outside of the local cafe in downtown Sesame Street. Big Bird and old Jack didn't bother to tip the driver, so they gave him a pebble. Those bastards deserve to be struck by a smooth criminal. Big Bird looked through the window of the cafe, learned that King Courtney's men were all in there in order to protect him. Rationalizing that he couldn't just go in their guns ablaze, Big Bird had to think of a new way to infiltrate the cafe. Undetected. Thinking quickly, Big Bird disguised himself as a mailman, or male bird, I guess, because of you and your pronouns, and headed inside the cafe. Big Bird tricked King Courtney into thinking he had a package for him.
"Well, bring it here then, Mom,"
King Courtney said as Big Bird pulled out a frickin' AK-47 and got ready to blast Courtney's brains out. Someone clap this fool! King Courtney commanded, but his troops had already ditched the scene and were running down the streets. They had no calm prepared for the sudden arrival, and Big Bird had used the element of surprise to his advantage. Big Bird put the AK-47 right to King Courtney's forehead. He began pleading for his life with, "Mon, if you kill me, the cops are going to be all over your house. I'll do anything, just please don't kill me, you know." Big Bird put the AK-47 down as he began to question his morals. Could Big Bird really bring himself to kill an innocent man? Could he really kill the poor son of a bitch before he even gets a chance to eat his cheesy beans on toast? Could he really kill someone who's got a PPI account? I think not. And so Big Bird opted not to kill King Courtney, and it was a good thing, too, as the Sesame Street SWAT team that appeared on the scene and attempted to arrest Big Bird was able to evade their arrest by pretending to be a carrot. That's one yellow, feathery, stupid-ass carrot. Leaving the cafe, Big Bird pretended that he'd killed King Courtney and asked for old Jack to take him to Stretch's crib. Because he's an ABDL, you know, those grown adults still like dressing up like they're still Okay, moving on. Over on Townsend Street, Stretch was discussing diplomatic relations with the local street sweepers. We've got bigger plans than trees, I'll tell you what. Okay, so this next scene is really weird. Is that Big Bird challenging Stretch to a football match? Sadly, Stretch was proper dumb and thought Big Bird had said harmonic reinforcements. This led to the pair playing basketball instead. "Suck a triple, baby," a sports commentator could be heard proclaiming in the background. I couldn't be too sure, but he sounded like he was high on toast. Vaseline on toast. Milhouse's favorite food, if you know your Simpsons trivia. Stretch was very skilled at basketball. Instead, up-kicked Big Bird's arse. Old Jack tried to get in on the game, but he forfeit the game because someone's going to take you out of the frame and put your name to shame. But even he was no match for Stretch. This confused Big Bird since old Jack used to be known as the Balla King of the Midwest. It turns out he had misheard, and that old Jack was actually the Bingo King of the Midwest. It happens. An easy mistake to make, I'm sure. "Oh, fuck this!" Big Bird yelled as he pulled out the AK-47 from earlier and proceeded to gun down Stretch. Once again, the henchmen, did nothing to help their fallen leader. Instead, ran down the street crying like little bitches as the cops then appeared on the scene to apprehend Big Bird and old Jack. However, as if by magic, the pair had already completely disappeared. Upon their running shoes, the pair ran all the way back to James Bird's crib. At the Bird residence, James Bird congratulated Big Bird for his success over a bowl of Christmas punch. "Right. So, what happens now?" Big Bird inquired. That's when a large group of federal agents came into the mansion, holding very powerful weapons. "You think I'm an idiot, Sonny? You didn't kill King Courtney? I can't trust someone who only does half a job. What do you think I am? A chemist?" James Bird joked. That joke makes no fucking sense. As it turns out, the owner of the cafe King Courtney was eating at was on Bird's payroll. She had snitched on Big Bird and told James about his lack of success in killing King Courtney. It's left unexplained as how James found out about Stretch. One could assume he read the paper. Read the papers. There's lots of stories in there, including some stories about cannibal geese with red eyes that glow in the dark like a Christmas tree, man, just like a Christmas tree. Furious over Big Bird's failure, James Bird opted to hire the Sesame Street Bureau of Investigation and kill him and old Jack. "Time's up, Big Bird," Bird said evilly. "I don't think so," Big Bird bellowed at the very tippy top of his lungs as he threw some salt right into Bird's eyes. "Oh, I said no salt," Bird cried as he attempted to get the salt grains out of his damn eyes. The feds were so busy laughing at Bird's misery that they failed to notice Big Bird and old Jack leaving the mansion via the fire exit. "So, where now?" old Jack asked. He began rummaging through the dumpster located behind the mansion. He was able to find some cheesy tacos, which were covered in snails. What a delicacy. "I know a place," Big Bird said like some kind of pigeon lady, as he and old Jack caught up off yet another cab. The episode then cut to show that Big Bird and old Jack had fled to New York City, which is supposedly where Sesame Street's located. I doubt it. I think it's located in North Yankton or something. Pretty sure, anyway. While in New York, the pair were able to infiltrate the Feather Friends Board of Birds by brutally assassinating the current head, whose name is yet to be revealed. And the pair took control of the board of birds, and that's when Big Bird showed just how truly cunning of a bird he could really be. Conspiring with Old Jack and social worker Miss Finch, Big Bird completely took control of Central Park and turned into a bird sanctuary of sorts. In order to keep the sanctuary running smoothly, Big Bird put a costly production racket on all the stores in the Bronx and Queens. He left Staten Island and Brooklyn in control of his trusted lieutenant Old Jack and his pet Salty Dog. This truly was the place to be for Salty Dog and me. Now, what made the board so dangerous was the very fact that they operated above the law. I am above the law! And Big Bird now considered himself to be too far above the law to be at risk of being taken down. So it was in that sense that both James Bird and King Courtney wisely decided to sue for peace, with Big Bird, who pretty much elected himself as the undisputed kingpin in New York City. Of course, every now and then someone tries to challenge his leadership, but Big Bird has contacts all around and is able to kill anyone who dare challenges him in his business. It was around this time Big Bird became a much more crueler muppet, though he kept a good public image by donating to several charities, rebuilding Gimbals from the ground up, and even taking over the Plaza Hotel after being given special permission from the hotel's ex-owner and former President Donald J. Trump. Now, Big Bird did many horrible things after taking control of New York City. One of the worst things he did was destroy the cure to the bird flu. You see, one day while attending a boring board meeting at an old rundown sawmill in Queens, the mosquito flew into Big Bird's office. Big Bird, that mosquito could make us billionaires, Miss Finch proclaimed happily. It was far too late, as Big Bird had already eaten the mosquito. Big Bird claims to have not heard Miss Finch's pleas, but I beg to differ. I know for a fact that Big Bird heard what she said, but he doesn't give a fuck about the idea of this mosquito possibly saving millions of people's lives, so he ate it. It was mainly to get back at the scientists from the beginning of the episode, if you remember. Do you? You better. Big Bird was so cold that he even recruited the smelly pigeons familiar into his ranks. The pigeons are incredibly smelly, and they sang the smelliest show tunes you ever did hear. Sounds worse than someone farting into a megaphone at max sound. It's that bloomin' bad brown sound. It's also rumored that Big Bird started getting involved in the drug trade and was doing heroin on the side, despite warning Old Jack and Miss Finch about getting involved in the trade, citing as being awful, dirty busyness. So why was there heroin hidden beneath the soup bowls at the old soup kitchen in Albany then, Big Bird? Huh, you hypocritical asswipe bitch, fucking hoe, bitch. That means cigarette. You know what I think? I think the betrayal of James Bird and the rude actions of Big Bird's neighbors back at Sesame Street is what helped to show us who Big Bird really is. A monster. And that's just fucking sick. The episode then ended with a small post-credits scene which had Grover snorting crack, I think. Though some people on IMDb claim it's powdered milk. But again, the nagging worry, what was Grover snorting in that famous post-credit scene? Probably some of Mr. Johnson's leftover honey sugar. You know, I have to say that episode was blooming disgusting. What a Bobby Jaguar. That episode made me realize just how much of a sick, twisted bastard that Big Bird really was all along. Big Bird? More like Big Prick, am I right? My VCR must have felt the same way as it started to rumble very violently. This is it, Tony Cipriani cackled. If you haven't ran out of our trailers, the VCR exploded into a million tiny bite-sized pieces. So that's why Cipriani was acting so shifty and fidgeting constantly. I just thought he had the flu. After speaking with some bomb experts who were frickin' worms, apparently Cipriani and his associate, an old Oriental gentleman, had stuck some dynamite on the bottom of my VCR. The reason? Well, it turns out that Cipriani had been bought out by the two bailiffs who were trying to evict me at the very beginning of the story, if you remember. You have ADHD. Cipriani had intended for the blast to kill me and my friends, but he failed to realize I have a force field built around my TV in case of emergencies like this one. It's a tough shit, Mr. Cipriani. So what happens now? Ryan asked as he began sweeping up the now destroyed VCR. I have an idea. It's a bit of a smeg one, but it's an idea nonetheless, I said, to which Ryan asked, Oh, really? And what's that? Well, there's this guy over on Harvard who's hiring people to work in his casino. He runs a pottery class in one of the back rooms of the casino. He pays anyone who attends the classes £55,000 a class. So I reckon that's my best bet to make back the money needed to buy those two bastard bailiffs. At that moment, my husband Peter came into the trailer, and though he was initially quite cross about what had happened to his prized VCR, he soon changed his tune once he learned that I was planning on getting myself a job over at the local casino. Can I come with you? Peter asked before continuing with, I may be a very short-sighted old bastard, but I know a thing or two when it comes to pottery. Just so you know, the pottery classes didn't last very long. Primarily because the owner of the casino, Kenji Kaysen, was a rude bugger. Kenji and his sister led the local Yakuza. He owns a casino which serves as one of the Yakuza's primary fronts. A lot of protection money comes through the casino. Kaysen was very rude to me for having a bald head and would often joke that my head looks like a boiled egg more so than a head. I was just so sick of it. Also, Kenji's one to talk. It's perhaps the strongest lisp I've ever had in my life, and I've seen. Actually, I've got nothing to compare it to. It's just that bad. So it turns out I was very wrong about assuming I'd skills in pottery. So I ended up throwing a bowl right at Hoover's chest, which nearly made him vomit out his intestines and perhaps shit them out, as it was 2:30 in the afternoon, after all. The really cringy teacher of the pottery class demanded that I apologize. When I refused, I was forcibly evicted off the premises. From that point on, Peter and I were both barred from ever returning to the casino again. Some good came out of all this, though, as Marion eventually came home from Oxford University after graduating earlier. Perhaps it's because she had her lecturer. So I was to look it up in the sun. Marion's a sick fuck. I was getting even more desperate to earn my fortunes back, so I decided to try my hand at winning the lottery. I managed to get the first number on the lottery ticket, but because I'm such a stupid bastard, I ended up not realizing I needed all the numbers on the lottery ticket in order to win the prize money. Hoover, on the other hand, as it turns out, had bought a ticket on his own, and as such was able to win the game with no problems asked. All the winning numbers, it would seem. Hoover paid off the two bailiffs, and using his hard-earned millions, he was able to convert the entire trailer into a mansion of sorts. Marion also became something of a leech during this period. She refused to associate with me any further, and instead became solely loyal to Hoover. Ain't got no respect, that dog hasn't. Hoover used his money in order to impose fear onto Peter and I. The pair of us were forced to take out all of the really boring chores that Hoover would have been doing, as he sort of still been a butler. However, our lives became upturned in more ways than one. We were sent on an errand by Hoover to retrieve a brand flat-screen TV from Argos. To make a long story short, upon getting back to the trailer, Peter and I kept procrastinating, setting the damn thing up by downing 6 cups of hot, sweet, deadly tea, all for free. Once we got the TV safely inside the trailer, Peter suggested laying the thing down onto the table. He and I went into the kitchen in order to make yet another cup of tea. Upon returning to the living room, we both sat down on top of the TV, which caused the screen to shatter into a million tiny bite-sized pieces. Now, wanting Hoover to realize that we'd broken his brand-new TV, we decided to act out all of the shows he's going to watch. But he saw through the charade very quickly and put a hit out on us. Gas Superintendent Chalmers, welcome. I hope you're prepared for an unforgettable luncheon. Dorbies everywhere. I look, I see Dorbies rolling to and fro. I see Dorbies. Why don't they go away? Dorbies rolling down the halls. I see Dorbies, tiny little balls. I see Dorbies. Why don't they go away? We really mean it. Why don't they go away? Dorbies. I miss my Sar. How I'd love to hear him roar. I miss my Soar. Say, have you seen him? Has anybody seen him? I miss my Soar. Good-looking albatross. Wow, nice picture stolen from the internet. That same day, myself, Peter, and Ryan all went on the run to Kensington, the royal borough up top. Having not even a cent to my name, I was forced to start living in a cardboard box just north of Strawberry. Yeah, we didn't stay in Kensington for very long, primarily because Hoover had been a lot of connections down there. Now living inside a cardboard box isn't that bad as you might think, so it's allowed for me to take a second look at my life choices up to that point. Things eventually started improving for me and my family, slowly but surely. was able to land myself a few gigs at the local karaoke bar by becoming a Freddie Mercury impersonator. Sing Queen, which discussed all the patrons present, but they're forced to endure it, otherwise the owner will stick a nightstick up their arses. Eventually severed all ties with Hoover and Marion. One time Hoover and Marion walked past us on a rainy afternoon in Kent, and I refused to acknowledge them, and Marion's pathetic attempts to gain my attention. Sorry, Marion, but I'm afraid the ship has sailed. You lost your right to speak to me when you decided to put money over friendship. According to you, Marion, friendship don't mean shit. So I guess I have to thank Tony Ciparini, then. For if he had never bothered giving me that Sesame Street VHS tape, I never would have been able to learn the bastard Hoover was just using me all along, and that he was likely never really my friend to begin with. Now, to be fair, I can't say I can blame him in all honesty, as I wasn't the best friend in the whole entire world, but still I figured Hoover would have handled his betrayal a little nicer. That goes for Marion, too. Punks like those two deserve each other, to be honest with you. Peter, Ryan, and I now travel Great Britain, performing gigs at various nightclubs and karaoke bars, God save the Queen. If you ever see a cardboard box in the middle of the street, please do come and say hello, because I'd be happy to see you and perhaps even make you a hot, sweet cup of tea. Goodbye. This is Pompadour P. Pompadour signing off. Ta-da!